Welcome back to On the Clock, our show about making the moments matter. I'm your host, Elisa Gums. Today, we're chatting about the dangers of perfectionism with award-winning journalist, motivational speaker, and blogger L'Oreal Thompson Payton, whose new book, Stop Waiting for Perfect, Step Out of Your Comfort Zone and Into Your Power, comes out next month. L'Oreal, we're so excited to have you here on the Clock. How are you today?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Good. It's a Friday. Like, who can
Yes,
complain about that,
finally.
right?
Exactly. We made it. We did it, Joe.
We did it. Yes. I always love to hear how people became who they are. Where did your love for writing start, and how did you get to where you are now in your career?
Oh gosh, such a great question with such a long answer that I will shorten for this purpose. But there's a picture of me and my sister. I'm about three and a half, maybe. She's like 6 months, propped up in the corner of the sofa, and I have this spiral bound notebook in my lap and a pen in the other hand. And I don't know what I'm writing. I was just writing. I was doing what I've loved. I've loved this since I was a kid, essentially a toddler, and reading. I've always had a love of books. I remember reading like the Berenstain Bears, Babysitter's Club, Sweet Valley High, and all of those books when I was younger. And as I got older and I was reading teen magazines, I didn't see myself represented in those pages. This was the time before Black Girl Magic, before Michelle Obama was Michelle Obama, before Beyonce was Beyonce, like she was still in Destiny's Child. And I didn't see that representation, right? It was a lot of Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. And I just felt alone, isolated because of that. And I also knew at the same time, like I had been journaling for a while. When I got to high school, I was editor in chief of my student newspaper and the literary magazine, and just knew that I wanted to be the change I wanted to see in the world, right? I wanted to see more Black girls in these pages. I wanted to use my gift as a writer to help others. And that kind of sparked this love of both reading and writing, but also just using the gift of storytelling to help other Black girls feel less alone.
Yeah. You're currently a health and wellness reporter at Fortune, where you cover women and wellness in the workplace. This is your very first book. Why did you decide to write a book, and why a book about perfection?
Again, another great question. I have been a lifelong, I don't even say recovering perfectionist because I'm still like doing the work. I haven't even gotten to the recovery part yet. I'm still unlearning, unpacking this lifetime of perfectionism that, as a Black woman in particular, has been kind of like our birthright, right? I remember, and I write in the book about interviewing for this summer camp when I was in middle school. And my mom had me dressed up in my Easter's finest. We had a portfolio, essentially. There was like a 3-ring binder of all of my accomplishments to date, all of my report cards and perfect attendance awards and every certificate to kind of like prove my worthiness, like why I should
For
be
summer camp.
accepted for summer camp. And I mean, like, I got in and it was great. And that's eventually I went to college as well. It was Loyola's Leaders and Scholars program. So it was a little bit more than your average day camp, but that was still a lot of pressure for a kid. And I remember reading, not reading, rather watching the season 2 opener of Scandal, right, where Papa Joe was telling Olivia very succinctly, you have to be twice as good to get half as much. And that's something I have faced throughout my life and throughout my career. And so I think about the Toni Morrison quote where she said, if there's a book you want to read and it hasn't been written yet, you have to write it. So I really took that to heart and decided to write this book because I love self-help books, avid reader, have read so many of them throughout my life. And a lot of times it seems to be kind of like rose-colored glasses or looking back like hindsight 2020 from people who are further along sharing their wisdom with us. And this is more of a peer-to-peer kind of conversation. Like, I'm in the trenches with you. I'm also going through this. I don't claim to have it all figured out because I think anyone who says that they do are lying. And so I'm just sharing kind of here's what's helped me along the way, and not with the goal of, ending perfectionism or imposter syndrome and self-doubt altogether. Although if that's the takeaway someone gets from it, that's great. And then maybe they can write the sequel or something. But the goal that I had was sharing tips to help shorten the spiral that I often find myself falling down when I'm second guessing myself, when I'm doubting myself and my gifts and my capabilities. And so this book is kind of that love letter to the overachievers, the highly ambitious perfectionists out there, and how we can learn a better way, a softer way of being in the world.
I think so much of what you just said is hitting a nerve with the women who are listening because, girl, we are all in the same boat.
Yes.
But the premise of your book really is that the quote unquote big problem that underlies our quest for perfection is that we don't trust ourselves
Hmm.
or our own dopeness. Can you please
Yes.
explain that?
It's so funny because the original title of the book was Trust Your Dopeness. And we found out throughout the process that, someone else owned the copyright. And so it's like, okay, we're back to the drawing board, talk about unlearning perfectionism and kind of learning to go with the flow. And the energy, the sentiment from that came from a pep talk that my friend Melissa Kimball, founder of hashtag Black Creative, sent me one time before a Twitter chat that she was leading. I was one of the panelists, and I was feeling a lot of doubt because the other panelist was founder of this nonprofit for girls. And I was just like, I don't know if my experience, if my expertise is enough. I didn't feel like enough. And she sent me this pep talk that essentially the TLDR summary was trust your dopeness. And I've been running with that ever since. Like, we are all the subject matter experts of our own lives and our experiences. And so we have to trust that and not lean so much into all of these certifications and credentials and degrees and all of these external factors. We've got the juice, we've got the sauce, we've got the swag. It's all within us. And it's time for us to trust that and release that, release it into the world and trust that everything is going to work out the way that it's supposed to.
Yeah. You said earlier, and you noted in the book that this problem is heightened for Black
Mhm.
women. At our
Yes.
Women of Power Summit this year, which is our annual conference for Black women in corporate America, we had a session called Progress, Not Perfection.
Love it.
And it resonated with so many of the women in attendance, many of whom labeled themselves, as you mentioned earlier, recovering
Mhm.
perfectionists. Why is it that we specifically are so prone to doubting ourselves?
Because the world doesn't want us to be great, right? Like, if we recognize and truly live into our power and potential, there's a lot of people that are going to be big mad. And so, like, the world and society benefits from Black women playing it small, from not taking those risks, from doubting themselves. And it's interesting because initially the book was solely about imposter syndrome. And as the title evolved and the content evolved and my own experiences evolved, it became bigger than that. And I know there's been a lot of conversation lately around imposter syndrome and whether it exists, is it real? And I think it's twofold, right? Like, yes, this is very accurate description of what I experience as a person, and there are other factors at play, such as racism and sexism and a whole lot of other isms that go into play that are feeding into that, right? So it's like both of these things can be true. I know that I in particular have experienced it, and it's really unfortunate because it's like we have so much to offer the world. We have so many gifts and talents, and it's people who feel threatened by Black women rising into their power, who want to keep us in their place because that's the only way that they can feel bigger and better about themselves. And so what I'm hoping is with this book, it's kind of a permission slip to be bigger, like step into your power, leave that comfort zone, stand up for yourself, and just recognize and relish in all that you are and all that you can be, right? Like self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all of that be damned, because we're pretty dope. Like, we're Black women. Hello. Like, everyone wants to be us. And so it's high time that we step into that and live into the magic that we are. And also recognizing, that there are hardships that come along with that. But they're not going to keep us down for long.
Yeah, it drives me crazy that we feel this way because as Black
Hmm.
women, we work so damn hard. And
Yes.
you said, it's not about having the credentials, it's not about having the certifications, but a lot of times we have the credentials
All
and
of
the
them.
certifications, all of it, and we
Yes.
still feel this way. So, how can we start to feel like we deserve the success that we really have rightfully earned?
Yeah, one of the things I'm actively working on, right, through all this book promotion, and this is my first time, so it's all very, it can be very nerve wracking, and there's a lot of doubt that can come into it as well, especially as a first time author, as a Black woman, because there aren't a lot of us. So it feels like there's a lot writing on this, not just for me, but also to like make a way for others who are coming up after me. And so one of the things I'm working on is silencing my inner critic, whom I've named Negative Nancy because I love alliteration. But I found that naming this critic, these negative thoughts and self-talk, because we all have them, we all experience it. There's all, we all have this person living inside of us who's telling us, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're not good enough. Sometimes it's our own voice, sometimes it's our mom or our spouse or our friend, or someone else who is afraid of us failing. We may be afraid of us failing, but they also, like, I think your inner critic has your best interest at heart, right? They're trying to keep you safe and in this place of comfort that because it's scary out there outside of your comfort zone. And that's also where the magic is. So I'm working on silencing that inner critic, or at least like kicking them out of the driver's seat, right? Like I write in the book, it's about taking back the keys. You can sit in the back seat, but you're no longer in the driver's seat. I'm the captain now, is kind of like what I've told it. And I also reflect a lot on, I have a feel goods folder where I save all of the DMs and the emails and the texts and the messages from people who have resonated with my writing, who have benefited from it in some shape, way, or form. And that also helps me on those rainy days where I'm feeling like I'm not good enough. This isn't good enough. Like, the world's kind of crashing in on me. And these messages remind me of my purpose, remind me of my why. And I'm able to reflect on that and understand that this is bigger than me. And then finally, I'm a big fan of a brag book, and I find these come in handy a lot of times during performance review, job interviews, when you're prepping for a speaking engagement or asking for a promotion, about to negotiate. And that's similar in saving like the professional accolades that you've accumulated, right? Like, you did really well on this presentation, or this report saved the company this amount of money, et cetera, to A, yes, make you feel good about yourself, and then B, present the case to the powers that be about why you deserve XYZ opportunity, right? So it's about keeping the receipts and reflecting on them as well, so that you can remind yourself how awesome and dope you are, but also present the case to others about why they need to buy into that too.
Those are really good tools. And I'm just going to recap them for anyone who's listening. Tell Negative Nancy to pipe down, or at least move over,
Yes.
get out the driver's seat. Keep
Yes.
a feel good folder for those days when you're not feeling great about yourself, and a brag book of your professional accomplishments, so that you know how to stand up for yourself and ask for what you're worth. Those are really, really good tools. I know, based on your story, but also what you shared earlier about showing up in your Easter best with your portfolio,
Yes.
that you were raised, as I was, to believe that you could outwork all obstacles. I mean, I was sort of nodding along in my head, because I remember one time I got a 97 on a test and I brought it home, and my mom was like, "Where are the other 3 points?"
Oh, man.
And I was,
I did my
so
best.
yes, I mean, so you're so right about, people just wanting us to always be our best. What was the lesson that taught you that success isn't guaranteed, even if you follow all the rules, even if you're perfect?
Ooh, how much time do we have? It's like, feel like there have been several, certainly in my professional life, when there have been promotions that I've advocated for, that I know I deserve, salary raises because I find out that colleagues are making way more than I am. And it's just, I think it honestly this year has become very clear to me, like, no matter how much I work, no matter what I do, for certain people, it's never going to be enough. And so then what am I going to place my self-worth? And I'm working on, what did Gwyneth Paltrow call it when her and what's his face were going through their
Oh,
divorce?
conscious uncoupling.
Yes, a conscious uncoupling between my self-worth and my work. And let me tell you, it has been a really, really hard process. We're talking about like 30 some years of unlearning this. And what has really helped me, honestly, is becoming a mom. Perfection and parenthood do not go together. And also being a mom to a Black daughter. And in therapy, my shout out to my therapist, because she's helped me a lot with reframing this. And she's like, when you're in a situation, think to yourself, like, what would you want Violet to do? And I stop and oftentimes reflect on that, because do I want her to continually push herself to the brink, and for what. And I think this moment really crystallized when we were hiking in Hawaii last year on a family vacation, a hike that I've done before with absolutely no problems, made it to the top, no big deal. And this time around, with a 20-pound something toddler strapped to my back, I was tired and I could see the top, and it was like another set of stairs. And I was just like, I can't do this. I need to take a break. I'm going to go sit down. And I turned to her and I explained, like, mommy's really tired right now. And it's important that we listen to our body and honor our boundaries. Now, mind you, she's like one, she had just turned one. So she's not really understanding what I'm saying. And it was important for me to live into that idea of softness and not having to overwork, not having to earn, like worthiness essentially. And so I'm hoping she's a great accountability partner in that way, because she's always watching and she already mimics like how I talk with my hands and how I sit, usually with like one leg underneath the other one. And so I know she's watching. And my hope is that by modeling this self-care and this different way of being that I didn't necessarily have growing up, that she will find a better way. And in doing that, I will also learn a different way of being as well.
Yeah. I love that. As you mentioned, the book is really like a peer to peer because
Mhm.
you're still going through it, and you're still struggling with parts of
Yes.
it. Part of that journey is, as you put it, to find magic in imperfection,
Mhm.
is accepting our struggles, accepting our flaws, and accepting our mistakes. What has that particular process been like for you?
Also very grueling because I think as a perfectionist, as a Black woman, I'm used to doing it all by myself, right? Like I help others, I don't need help. And again, with parenting, a very humbling process where there was just a very distinct moment I remember vividly. And I also write about in the book that because usually my husband puts the baby to sleep, like after I nurse her, then he comes in and rocks her, everything else, and I'm like free to do whatever. And he, in this particular night, was at an event, and so it was on me, and I was like, I can do this, like I got this. And in the movie version of my life with Morgan Freeman narrating, he was like, she would soon learn that she did not got this. Like she was, and he came home, poor guy, like to both me and the baby crying, like just really going through it. And I remember in that moment texting a friend and just being like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this motherhood life. Like, I don't know that I have like the strength and the patience that's required. And I think the next day, I just, in a true moment of vulnerability, because that's also not something that I like lean to in that way in terms of needing help. I'm getting better because when I went on Instagram and I was talking about just like the hard time I was going through, a couple of friends reached out and were like, hey, do you need me to come over and watch the baby this weekend? Do you need help with XYZ? And I was like, yes. So that was step one, just learning to accept the help. I'm getting better at learning to proactively ask for it, like before it gets to a really dire situation. But that's, it's going to take some time. It's going to take a lot of learning and unlearning and vulnerability that has not always been seen as right? Because Black women are superheroes, right? Like we save everyone else, and it's like, who's going to save us? Who's going to help us? And so being vulnerable and saying, I don't got this. I am struggling right now. I really need help has been one of the ways in which just and learning the perfectionism and having to put up this facade as if I have it all together at all times, because I don't and nobody does. But we all spend a lot of time on social media lying and making it look like we do. So but I don't have time for that. I need to be honest and just be like, I don't have it all together.
Yeah. There's a section in the book on dealing with
Mm,
fear of failure, which we touched on briefly, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown, and the one that we probably talk about the least, fear of success.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's a big one, I think. How can we figure out what's paralyzing us and push through it anyway?
A lot of self work and reflection, therapy, I'm a big proponent of. And even then, just getting quiet, getting very still, journaling out, your thoughts. I'm a big proponent of the feelings wheel it has like six main emotions in the middle, and then it breaks out into all of these other thoughts. My therapist shared it with me because I think oftentimes, when someone asks you like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? You're like, fine. And it's like, spoiler, fine is not one of the emotions that is covered on the feelings wheel, because that's not a feeling. And so just being honest with yourself, reflecting on where is this fear coming from? And is it your fear to own? Like I mentioned before, is it your mom who is, like more comfortable with you taking the good government job with benefits than pursuing a more creative career? Is it your friend or an associate who may actually be jealous that you are planning to do something that perhaps they had thought about but didn't have the courage to do themselves? And so just thinking about, like, is this my fear? Am I the one who's saying these things? Or is it someone else's fear that I've kind of absorbed and adopted as my own? And so getting through all of that, figuring out where's the origin of it, and then just recognizing, I shout out to Elaine Fluker, the Support is Sexy podcast, and her book rather, Get Over I Got It, because she is the first one I heard that talked about like feeling the fear and do it anyway. Like, I don't know if the goal is ever to be completely fearless, because I don't know if that exists. It's kind of like perfection in that way, where it's this myth that we've all built up and glamorized in our heads. And so just, like, there's going to be fear regardless of what you do, and also approaching it as a good thing, because it means you're growing, you're expanding outside of your comfort zone into where the magic is. So I feel like fear is taking that as a good sign, right? And the imposter syndrome is a good sign, because it means that you're leveling up in your life or your career. And so it's uncomfortable, yes. And learning to push past it and bringing it with you, I think, can be really powerful as well, because it humanizes you and you recognize, like, yeah, I'm really afraid to do this thing and I might fail. That's one option. But you may also like really blow it out of the park. Like what's the quote? Like, what if I fail, or what if I fall? I forget. And the other one is like, well, what if you fly? I might be butchering that, but it's something to that extent, where there's this one option, but also we, as humans tend to think about the worst case scenario. There's also a world where you may, end up being really successful as well. And you'll never know until you take that chance, and you can learn from it and you can grow from it. But the whole point is that if you're waiting for that perfect moment to take that leap or take that chance, you'll never do it, because the perfect moment doesn't exist. You're always going to run into some kind of obstacle. There's always going to be some kind of excuse. But if you at least start, you can always pivot, you can reiterate, you can make something better, but you can't fix nothing. Like, you can fix bad. There's this one tweet that I read about writing. It's like, you can fix bad, but you can't fix nothing. So at least putting yourself out there, it's scary, yes, but once you do, you have the opportunity to make it better. But if you never do, then you'll never know.
Yeah. Is there a tactic that has helped you personally as you try to push through fear? I know some people have an affirmation, some people have a song, some people actually practice doing like little things that they're afraid of or that are outside of their comfort zone to build up that muscle. What works for you?
Pressing send on something and just putting it out there. There's so many ideas that live in my notes app, and I had for years been wanting to launch a podcast. I bought the mic, I had the software and all the ideas and everything. And literally, like, since 2020, I had been sitting on this and sitting on it. And this year, because it's like, well, what do I look like putting out this book telling people to stop waiting for perfect? And meanwhile, I'm not practicing my own advice. And so I launched it earlier this year with the idea, again, I can reiterate, I can make it better, but I need to at least put it out there to get the feedback from other people to figure out what's working and what's not working. And so shout out to Elaine again, because she had talked about like 5 seconds of courage. And sometimes that's, all it takes. You draft up that email that seems really scary. And even if you cover your eyes and press send real quick just to get it out there and into the world. I mean, you do what you have to do. I absolutely believe in affirmations. I listen to meditations some mornings, not a lot because it's chaotic with the daycare work preparation and everything like that. But just taking those moments to yourself and hyping yourself up, right? And no one's going to hype you up like you're going to hype yourself up. No one's going to believe in you, in your dreams, in the way that you believe in them. So, have your trusted circle, your people that you can confide in and share those insecurities. But the people, I joke about my work husband in the book who had told me about, like releasing the podcast, like as is, even in all of its imperfection and everything like that, because who knows what it might evolve into. So having your people, I think, is really important to help and encourage you to, okay, we're not going to wait for the perfect moment. We're not going to wait until we have all our proverbial ducks in the row. We're going to launch and see. And so it's a group project, honestly, in that way of having, your people in your corner who are around you and beside you to help you out and talk you down from that ledge, and like really make you reflect the best in you, right? Because we are all our own worst critic, but having the people who are able to hype you up and hold you down is so crucial to your success in both like your career but also life as well.
And I love that you said you don't listen to the meditations every morning, because you don't have to. You don't have to be the perfect meditator. We don't have to have the perfect
Yes.
self-care routine. Or, even the things that we do to help us not be perfect, sometimes we try to be perfect at those things,
Oh,
or it's
don't
not
I
going to
know it?
work. And
Yeah.
that's not how it is.
No.
The other thing that I love is that you remind women that learning to trust yourself isn't a one-time achievement. Like, you don't learn the lesson and then you've got it all down pat and that's it,
Mhm.
like you're done. It's constant work.
Yes.
So before you go, are there any tips that you want to leave with the women watching, to help them build their confidence and embrace their accomplishments?
Yeah, I joke half jokingly have like this alter ego, right? Like Beyonce has Sasha Fierce. Mine, like Kendra, sometimes I'll refer to myself by my last name, like pull it together, Peyton. Like whatever the pep talk is you have to give to yourself. I've also been known to like blast Beyonce before speaking engagements or other things I'm nervous about, like having your playlist that's gonna hype you up as well. Formation is mine, Diva, like literally the whole Homecoming album, if I'm being honest. And striking, it sounds really weird, but I know that Amy Cuddy had made that TED talk about the power pose. So like standing with your hands on your hips and your elbows out like Wonder Woman, and that physical representation of taking up space in a world that has taught us to shrink ourselves and play it smaller. Like expanding yourself in that way is also one of the mental and physical tricks that I've used with myself to hype myself up in the moment. So like whatever you need to do, there's just a couple of the tools that I have in my tool bag to help hype me up in that moment, but pulling on whatever that is and doing those rituals, because everyone's got something, right? Like Obama and even Michael Phelps would like listen to Eminem's Lose Yourself, right? They talked about that. And so just finding those things that are going to, and hopefully this book will be part of that, right? This is designed to be a little pep talk for you to revisit in those moments of doubt, in the times that are scary to you, when you're about to break out of your comfort zone and step into the unknown. And by doing that, you're also stepping into your power and your greatness and your dopeness. And so my wish is just that readers will trust that Black women will trust that, and that we're going to start like this whole movement of letting go of imperfection and just being our imperfect, beautiful selves.
Yeah, this has been so powerful. Thank you so much, L'Oreal, for sharing the unique ways you're helping people make the most of the time we've been giving by helping us give ourselves permission to be imperfect, but to thrive nonetheless. And thank you all for watching On the Clock. We'll see you next time as we continue to talk about working with purpose and living with passion.